Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Well, all that for nothing, or rather all that for a nothing, which is what Daniel Cameron is. His pathetic campaign to become governor of Kentucky has predictably failed. Daniel Cameron is a piece of trash, a liar and a criminal. He lied to the grand jury about Breonna Taylor's murder, and he did everything he could to stop them from telling the public the lies that he had told them. This worm is a walking example of why one should never underestimate the power of one's own stupidity. He's a fool, though that's not to say he's a harmless fool. He went out of his way to make it clear that his office was dedicated to making sure black people could be killed with impunity. And I'm pretty convinced that the crimes he committed in covering for the murder of Breonna Taylor played more than a little part in his failure this week to become governor. During the governor's campaign, one of the white-funded, allegedly black political action committees put out ads saying that Daniel Cameron was skinfolk, but not kinfolk. Those were the words they used. And this ad also reminded people of the part that he played in helping Breonna Taylor's murder go unpunished. I had told you then that that was his entire MO. He was hoping to climb over a mountain of murdered black people as his ladder to higher office. That was the entire reason that he told those lies, why he refused to bring charges. This was what his white paymasters wanted him to do, to amuse them, and like an obedient slave, he obeyed. Breonna Taylor was murdered in March of 2020, and Daniel Cameron thought that because Trump had won Kentucky by a landslide, 62% to Biden's 36%, that meant that Cameron would beat Brashear by a landslide if he ran against him in the next election. Or at the very least, he was hoping that he would win, even if not necessarily by a landslide. But Cameron's blatant refusal to prosecute Breonna Taylor's murderers, even after he knew that the no-knock warrant that led to her death was obtained through police lies, it shows that that wasn't incompetence on his part. It was an intentional political strategy. This was what he thought was going to pave the way for him to get to the governor's mansion. He knew that egregiously ignoring the law, especially in this case, would make racists in Kentucky happy, and he thought that would create a red wave to sweep him to higher office. Now let's be bluntly honest here. Kentucky is a deep red state, and truth be told, there's no numerical reason that Cameron should have lost. Conservative voters have the advantage there, at least as far as regular turnout goes. Andy Brashear should have been stomped, and yet all those white conservatives who turned out in droves for Trump 3 years ago didn't turn out for Cameron this week. Those white GOP voters in Kentucky who gave Trump a landslide victory stayed home when they saw he was on the ballot. And worst of all, Cameron had Trump's endorsement. Trump actually said, "This is my guy, you should vote for him." In a state where Trump carried 2/3 of the vote, Daniel Cameron's victory should have been a cakewalk. And yet this moron still lost. All those lies he told, all the laws he broke to deceive the grand jury and protect murderers. He was so sure that the racist Rube voters he was trying to appeal to would be only too eager to make him governor. He filed nuisance suits against Biden. I mean, this guy was just doing the most with all of that performative extremism. See, Daniel Cameron needed to become governor because he doesn't really have any further up the ladder that he can climb. Mitch McConnell is senile and demented, and while he doesn't know what day of the week it is, he's not retiring anytime soon either. Even if the mentally disabled McConnell were to resign his Senate seat, he has plenty of other white candidates that he would like to see replace him. Daniel Cameron certainly wouldn't be first on McConnell's list of replacements. And after Cameron got his butt stomped in a state that Trump carried in a landslide, Mitch is probably thinking, assuming he still knows what planet he's on, that Cameron is just too much of a risk. He's not ready for prime time. The good old boys in Kentucky don't want a black person to be their senator, even if he does help them get away with murder. Cameron actually thought that he could paint himself out as being some sort of family man. Only problem is with the voters that he was trying to appeal to, they didn't like seeing him with his white wife and their biracial baby. That didn't improve his standing in their eyes. They hate black people, they don't like interracial marriages, and they are terrified and disgusted at the prospect of biracial children because that reduces the number of the pure white children. So as they see it, not only did this Negro Cameron take a white woman, or rather a white woman's womb, off the market, he also used this white woman's womb to produce impure children. That's how these white supremacists he was trying to appeal to see it. Now, Daniel Cameron may have been stupid enough to convince himself that those racists didn't have a problem with his misadventures in miscegenation, but clearly they're not playing along with his delusion. So what's he going to do now? Run for Congress? Probably become a lobbyist or some other form of influence peddler. Or maybe he'll decide that he wants to try to start some sort of political consulting business. That's what a lot of these politicians do when they fail to gain higher office or when they term limit out. My money, though, is on that he's going to try to beg Trump for a cabinet position, assuming the orange man can get reelected. But there's so many other Trump stooges and shills competing for those slots, Cameron will have to kiss Trump's rump extra sweet if he wants to be considered. Because unless McConnell takes pity on him, that's the only way Cameron's going to make it to D.C. I say Cameron must pay for his crimes. His law license should be the first thing he loses, along with his freedom, for how he illegally misled the grand jury and how he knowingly refused to prosecute killers he knew to be guilty and who he knew had broken laws to obtain an illegal and fraudulent no-knock warrant. The same way that racist busybodies in Chicago went to a court to get approval for a special prosecutor to go after Jussie Smollett for a misdemeanor, no less. There should also be a focused effort in Kentucky on getting a special prosecutor to go after Daniel Cameron. We already know that Jim Crow Joe Biden isn't going to do it. He's trying to play both sides, and in a war between justice and savagery, that doesn't work. Biden's poll numbers are continuing to crash, and he's going overboard to show that rather than obey the black constituency who put him in the White House, he's instead going to try to thread the needle of appealing to the casual racist, read white moderates, who didn't want him last time and aren't going to vote for him this time either. It's a sucker bet. And speaking of suckers, Daniel Cameron's bet everything on deliberately allowing Breonna Taylor's murderers to go unpunished. His gamble, though, went bust. Running against black people is not really a long-term political strategy. It may give an immediate temporary sugar rush to the racists, but that wears off pretty quick, and when black people push back, they realize how little impact their feel-good attacks on us actually had. You know, Rick Snyder thought that he could commit genocide against Flint, Michigan residents by poisoning their water supply, and that he would use that racial attack to propel him to Washington. But instead, he's now been forced out of politics and can't run for dog catcher. Moron DeSantis did more than practically any other politician in U.S. history to show his contempt for black people. He endorsed and promoted racist laws and reimaginings of history where slavery was a good thing, and whenever he talked, his sentences were usually a noun and a verb followed by the word woke. He said woke so much, he put his own audience to sleep. He got a lot of attention for this tactic until it became clear that anti-black screeds was about all he knew how to do. Now his campaign is falling like a lead balloon, and whereas Daniel Cameron can at least pray that maybe Mitch McConnell will ask him to fill his seat when he dies or is medically incapacitated and can't even make it to D.C. anymore, DeSantis doesn't even have that much going for him. If a governor can't get elected president, they don't go to the House of Representatives. That's a step down. And they can't necessarily circulate through other statewide offices of their state. They can't try to hopscotch to the Secretary of State's office. No, they have to go up. And what that means is they have to go for a Senate seat. The problem for DeSantis is that both of Florida's Senate seats are filled, one by Marco Rubio and the other by DeSantis' predecessor, former Florida Governor Rick Scott. And neither one of them is looking to retire anytime soon. It's said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. This is what the GOP's race baiters like Daniel Cameron have done. And while Cameron's plan blew up in his face, that's not to say the enemy is going to stop. Not in Kentucky or anywhere else. This week in Aurora, Colorado, another of the thugs with badges who killed Elijah McClain has been acquitted. As we all know, this is actually the prosecutor's doing. Now, the murder of Elijah McClain was particularly reprehensible to me. I won't say the kind of thoughts that I've had since watching that murder take place. Though, and this will surprise you, there's one thing I will say. It's good for black people to see the bad guys trying to push back. Our biggest problem has been that we're consistently inconsistent. We have to put the enemy on the defensive and keep the bastards there. One of the things that we need to internalize, though, is that the enemy is on a suicide mission. You see, the enemy's top priority is not necessarily winning their race war against black people. Their goal is mostly trying to harm as many of us as possible. That's what gives them their jollies. That's what they're truly dedicated to. That's what drives them the most. These anti-black racists are not driven primarily by survival. They've shown time and again that they will gladly offer up their own children, no matter how young, if they think that it's going to support their power or if it's going to attack ours. These white supremacists are so sick and deranged that even if they knew that they would go extinct tomorrow, they would still waste their last hours in this world trying to kill us. That's why I gave you that morning briefing yesterday about Ed Blum. These anti-black racists will not stop for anything, and we need to understand that fact. Because bootlicking traitors like Daniel Cameron have put all their chips on white supremacy, so they don't have a way back. They go down with the ship too, so they have no choice but to be as extremist as their white paymasters. We have attacks coming at us from these white racists on the right and the left, and we have a lot of black people who are helping them do it. The same way these congressional black talkers sit on their hands and say nothing and do nothing in regards to getting us the money that we're due or making sure that those who harm us pay a price, the same goes for the bootlicks on the right. Self-interested professional BS artists all around. That's your so-called black leadership class. But then again, these clowns were handpicked by the very white racist politicians who we have to do battle with daily. Black people must take an individual and group security stance seriously. Alabama gave us a demonstration of how it works at the group level with the Riverside Reckoning, and Kenneth Walker demonstrated in Louisville how it's accomplished at the individual level. The enemy will take L's, but if there's one thing we should have learned, it's that giving the enemies of Black America a defeat isn't something that will just happen on its own. Anti-black racists take a loss only when we hand it to them. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Lawrence Shaver, Sherman Marshall, Mark Anderson, Samora Morris, and Marlon Hillman. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.